I had been looking forward to my 70th birthday for weeks. Not because I particularly enjoyed getting older, but because it would be the first time in years that my entire family would be together. My daughter Elizabeth had promised to organize everything. A small gathering at her house with my son Michael, who was flying in from Australia, my 3 grandchildren, and a few close friends. The morning of my birthday started pleasantly enough. I woke up early, as I always do these days, and spent some time looking through old photographs. 70 years of memories, from a small-town girl to a wife, mother, and now a grandmother. It hadn't always been easy, especially after my husband Richard passed away 5 years ago. But I had built a good life. My phone rang at precisely 9 a.m. It was Elizabeth. "Mom, there's been a slight change of plans," she said, her voice carrying that forced cheerfulness that immediately put me on alert. "Could you come over around 4 instead of 2? We're running a bit behind." "Of course, dear," I replied, hiding my disappointment. I had been ready since dawn, my new dress laid out, my hair freshly done the day before. "Is everything all right?" Fine. Just some last-minute preparations. Michael's flight got in late, and we're still setting up." I spent the extra hours puttering around my small apartment, the one I'd moved to after selling the family home following Richard's death. It was a nice place, though sometimes it felt too quiet. The walls were decorated with family photos, Elizabeth's graduation, Michael's wedding, the grandchildren at various ages. My life's accomplishments stared back at me from every corner. At 3:30, I called a taxi. Elizabeth had offered to send her husband to pick me up, but I had declined. I enjoyed my independence, and besides, I didn't want to be a burden. That was something I had always been careful about since Richard died, not to become a burden to my children. Elizabeth's house was in the upscale part of town, a large 2-story home with a manicured lawn that always made me proud. My children had done well for themselves, and wasn't that what every parent wanted? As the taxi pulled up to the curb, I noticed several cars parked in the driveway and along the street. More guests than I had expected. Perhaps Elizabeth had planned a bigger surprise than she'd let on. The thought warmed my heart. I paid the driver and carefully made my way up the stone path to the front door. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open, and there stood my son Michael, looking tanned and handsome after years under the Australian sun. "Mom!" he exclaimed, wrapping me in a tight hug. "Happy birthday! You look amazing!" "Oh, stop it," I laughed, though I had taken extra care with my appearance today. "Let me look at you. Australia clearly agrees with you." We chatted briefly in the entryway before he led me toward the back of the house, where I could hear voices and laughter coming from the large family room that opened onto the patio. "Everyone's excited to see you," Michael said, giving my hand a squeeze. "It's been too long." As we entered the room, a chorus of "surprise" erupted, and I found myself surrounded by familiar faces. My grandchildren rushed forward first, Emily, now a teenager, Daniel, almost 12, and little Sophie, just 7. Behind them were a few of my oldest friends, some neighbors, and Elizabeth's in-laws. Elizabeth approached with a glass of champagne, kissing me on the cheek. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said, handing me the glass. "I hope you like what we've done." The room was beautifully decorated with tasteful 70 signs and flowers everywhere. A large table held a magnificent cake and an array of elegant hors d'oeuvres. It was perfect, not too much, not too little. "It's wonderful, dear," I said, genuinely touched. "Thank you for doing all this." The next hour passed in a pleasant blur of conversations, catching up with friends I hadn't seen in months and hearing about Michael's life in Sydney. I was just beginning to relax when Elizabeth clinked her glass for attention. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment," she called out, standing near the fireplace. "I'd like to say a few words about our guest of honor, my mother, on her 70th birthday." The room quieted as everyone turned toward her. I felt a flush of pleasure and a twinge of embarrassment at being the center of attention. 70 years is quite a milestone," Elizabeth began, smiling at me. "Mother has seen so much in her lifetime. She raised 2 children, supported our father through his career, and always put the family first." There were nods and warm smiles around the room. I noticed Michael shifting slightly beside me, a small frown crossing his face. "And now, at 70, Elizabeth continued, her voice taking on a slightly different tone, She enters a new phase of life, one where we hope she can finally relax and enjoy her remaining years without worry. Something in her phrasing made me uneasy, but I kept smiling, not wanting to dampen the mood. "Which brings me to our gift," she said, looking to her husband who handed her an envelope. "Mom, we know how much you value your independence, but we also know that, at your age, living alone isn't ideal. So, after much family discussion," my heart began to pound. "Family discussion? What family discussion?" "We've found a wonderful retirement community just 20 minutes from here. It's called Sunset Meadows, and we've put down a deposit for you to move in next month." The room had gone completely silent. I could feel every eye on me as I struggled to process what I was hearing. I don't understand," I finally managed to say. "I'm very happy in my apartment. I don't need to move." Elizabeth's smile tightened slightly. "Mom, be reasonable. You're 70 now. Living alone isn't safe. What if you fall? What if there's an emergency?" "I'm perfectly healthy," I said, my voice stronger now. "My doctor just gave me a clean bill of health last month. I'm active, I volunteer, I have friends." "It's not just about health," Elizabeth interrupted. "It's about practicality. Your apartment is too far from any of us to check on you regularly, and it's expensive. This way, you can use the money from selling it to fund your stay at Sunset Meadows." "And what about my choice in all this?" I asked, aware that my voice was rising but unable to stop it. "Did anyone think to ask what I want?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Some guests began to study their drinks intently, while others whispered to each other. "Mom," Elizabeth said, her voice taking on that tone one might use with a difficult child, "we're trying to help you. You're getting older. You need to be practical about your limitations." "My limitations?" I repeated, incredulous. What limitations would those be, exactly? That's when she said it, the words that would echo in my mind for months to come. "Mom, be realistic. At 70, you don't have the same value or capabilities you once did. It's time to accept help and stop being stubborn. You don't have the same value anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked around the room, at the faces of friends and family, searching for someone to contradict her, to stand up for me. Michael looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. My friends seemed embarrassed. Even my grandchildren were quiet, though little Sophie looked confused and upset. "I see," I said finally, setting down my untouched champagne. "Well, thank you for the party. I think I'd like to go home now." "Mom, don't be dramatic," Elizabeth sighed. "We're just trying to have a reasonable conversation about your future." "There's nothing reasonable about making decisions for me without my input," I replied, gathering my purse and the small sweater I'd brought. "And there's certainly nothing reasonable about telling me I have no value because I'm 70. "That's not what I meant," Elizabeth began, but I cut her off. "It's exactly what you meant, and now I understand why you wanted this big gathering today. You thought I wouldn't make a scene in front of everyone, that I'd just smile and accept whatever you decided for me." The room was painfully silent now. I straightened my back, looked around at the assembled guests, and forced a smile. "Thank you all for coming. It was lovely to see you, but I'm afraid I need to cut this short." I turned and walked toward the door, my head high despite the humiliation burning through me. Michael hurried after me. "Mom, wait. Let me drive you home." "I'll call a taxi," I said stiffly. "Please," he said, lowering his voice. "I had no idea about any of this, I swear. Let me take you home and we can talk." Something in his expression convinced me, and I nodded. As we walked out to his rental car, I could hear Elizabeth explaining to the guests, her voice carrying an edge of exasperation. "She's always been stubborn. This is exactly why we need to make these decisions for her." The drive to my apartment was mostly silent. Michael attempted conversation a few times, but I wasn't ready to talk. My mind was racing, replaying Elizabeth's words over and over. "You don't have the same value anymore." When we arrived at my building, Michael insisted on coming up. Once inside my apartment, he looked around with genuine appreciation. "This is really nice, Mom. I can see why you love it here." I nodded, still not trusting myself to speak without breaking down. I busied myself making tea, a habit that had always calmed me. "Mom," Michael said finally, sitting at my small kitchen table, "I'm so sorry about what happened. I had no idea Elizabeth was planning any of that." "Did you know about this retirement home?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer. She mentioned it, he admitted, but I thought it was just an idea she was floating, not something she'd already put money down on. And I certainly didn't think she'd spring it on you like that at your birthday party of all places. I set the teacups down with a bit more force than necessary. And what did you think of her idea? Another hesitation. I told her we should talk to you first, that it should be your decision. But you didn't disagree with the premise, I pressed, that at 70, I'm suddenly incapable of living independently. That's not fair, Mom, he said, looking pained. It's not about capability. It's about what's best in the long run, about planning ahead. Planning ahead would be discussing options with me, not making decisions for me, I pointed out. I'm not senile, Michael. I'm not invalid. I'm 70, not 107. He had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. We should have talked to you first. It was wrong to ambush you like that. We sipped our tea in silence for a moment. There's something else, I said finally. Something that explains why Elizabeth is suddenly so concerned about my living arrangements. What do you mean? I set down my cup and looked him directly in the eye. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter from my financial advisor. He's retiring and wanted to review my estate planning before he hands my accounts over to his successor. Michael waited, clearly not seeing the connection. So, I went to see him, I continued, and he showed me exactly what my investments are worth now. Richard was always good with money, you know. And apparently, his investments have done very well since he passed. Understanding began to dawn on Michael's face. How well? He asked quietly. Well enough that Elizabeth would have been very surprised, I said. I mentioned it to her casually during our weekly call, just that I'd had good news from the financial advisor. I didn't give details. And you think? I think my practical, sensible daughter suddenly realized that her 70-year-old mother might be sitting on a significant inheritance. An inheritance that could be spent on years of independent living unless she's safely tucked away in a retirement home, with the excess going to her children. Michael looked troubled. That's a pretty serious accusation, Mom. Is it? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Then explain to me why, after 5 years of me living perfectly happily and safely in this apartment, she suddenly decides, without consulting me, that I need to move to a retirement home, and announces it at my birthday party no less. He had no answer for that. The saddest part, I said, feeling the hurt well up again, is hearing her say I have no value anymore, as if my worth as a person diminished the moment I hit 70, as if everything I am, everything I know and feel and can contribute, suddenly doesn't matter. She didn't mean it that way, Michael said, but his defense lacked conviction. She did, I replied softly, and that's what hurts the most. Not the retirement home idea, not even the fact that she's eyeing my money, but the realization that my own daughter sees me as nothing more than an old woman whose only remaining worth is her inheritance. Michael reached across the table and took my hand. What are you going to do? I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd built for myself after Richard died, at the independence I valued so highly. I'm going to show her exactly how much value a 70-year-old woman can have, I said, a plan already forming in my mind. And in the process, I'm going to teach my daughter a lesson she'll never forget. Little did Elizabeth know, the inheritance she was so eager to get her hands on was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. And her 70-year-old mother, whom she had dismissed as valueless, was about to show her just how wrong she was. The morning after my disastrous birthday party, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest when I remembered Elizabeth's words, but alongside it was something new, determination. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, making a list of everything I needed to do. First on the list, call my financial advisor. James Peterson had been handling my finances for over 20 years, ever since Richard and he had become golfing buddies. He answered on the second ring. Margaret, I was just thinking about you. How was the big birthday? Illuminating, I replied dryly. James, I need to make some changes to my financial arrangements. How soon can I come in? There must have been something in my voice, because his tone immediately shifted from casual to professional. I have an opening at 11 hours today. Would that work? Perfect. I'll see you then. Next, I called my friend Eleanor, who had been at the party yesterday. Eleanor and I had been friends since our children were in elementary school together, and she was one of the few people who had always been straight with me. "Margaret, I was going to call you," she said when she answered. "That party was, well, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I assured her. "But I do need a favor. Can you recommend a good lawyer? Not for anything dramatic," I added quickly. "Just someone who specializes in estate planning. Actually, my niece Rebecca is an estate attorney. She's very good. Want me to give her a call? That would be wonderful. And Eleanor? I'd appreciate if you kept this between us for now." "Of course," she said firmly. "After what happened yesterday, I think you're entitled to some privacy." By 10:30, I was dressed in my best pantsuit, the navy one that Richard always said made me look like I meant business, and heading to James's office. As I waited for my rideshare, my phone rang. It was Elizabeth. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Elizabeth." "Mom," she began, her voice a mixture of exasperation and forced patience. "We need to talk about yesterday." "Yes, we do," I agreed. "But not right now. I have an appointment." "An appointment? With whom?" The demanding tone in her voice only strengthened my resolve. "That's my business, Elizabeth. We can talk later." "Mom, you're being childish. We were only trying to help. If you just listened—" "I listened quite clearly," I interrupted. "You made your position very plain. Now I need to go. My ride is here." I hung up before she could respond, silencing my phone as I got into the car. I wouldn't let her ruin my focus today. James greeted me warmly at his office, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "What can I do for you today, Margaret?" "I want to make significant changes to my estate plan," I said, getting straight to the point. "And I want to explore options for how I can use my money while I'm still alive." He nodded slowly. "What kind of changes did you have in mind?" "First, I want to understand exactly what my assets are worth and what options I have for accessing them. Then I want to revise my will and possibly set up some trusts." For the next hour, James walked me through my financial situation in detail. As I'd learned at our last meeting, Richard's investments had done exceptionally well. Between those, the life insurance, and the proceeds from selling our family home, I was worth considerably more than I'd realized. "The thing is, James," I explained, "I've been living quite modestly since Richard died. I sold the house because it was too big for just me, but I could actually afford something much nicer than my current apartment if I wanted." "That's absolutely true," he confirmed. "You've barely touched the principal. With proper management, you could upgrade your lifestyle significantly and still leave a substantial inheritance." The word inheritance made me think of Elizabeth's calculating eyes. "That's the other thing. I want to rethink how my estate will be distributed." James looked at me carefully. "May I ask what prompted this review?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "My daughter has made it clear that she sees me as a burden and my only remaining value as my potential inheritance. I'd like to make some adjustments to reflect that new understanding." To his credit, James didn't look shocked or try to talk me out of it. He simply nodded. "I understand. What are you thinking?" "I'm not sure yet. That's why I've also arranged to speak with an estate attorney. But I know I want more control over my assets now, and I want to ensure they're used in ways that align with my values." By the time I left James's office, I had a much clearer picture of my financial situation and several options to consider. My next stop was the law office of Rebecca Winters, Eleanor's niece. Rebecca was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 30s, but she had a confident, professional manner that immediately put me at ease. After I explained my situation, giving her a somewhat sanitized version of the birthday party incident, she leaned forward, her expression serious. "Mrs. Palmer, what you're describing is unfortunately common. Many older adults find themselves facing pressure from family members about their living arrangements and financial decisions. But let me be very clear. At 70, you are fully entitled to make your own decisions about your life and your money." "That's refreshing to hear," I said with a small smile. "My daughter seems to think turning 70 automatically made me incompetent." "Far from it," Rebecca assured me. "Now, let's talk about what you want to accomplish with your estate plan." I spent another hour with Rebecca, discussing various legal structures and options. By the end, I had the beginnings of a plan that felt right, not vindictive, but fair, not hasty, but decisive. "I'll draw up the initial documents for you to review," Rebecca said, as we concluded. In the meantime, I'd suggest documenting any further conversations with your daughter or son about these matters. It could be relevant if there are any future disputes. I hope it won't come to that, I said sincerely. I don't want a legal battle with my own children. I just want respect. Sometimes, establishing clear boundaries is the most respectful thing you can do, Rebecca observed, for both parties. As I left her office, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since the birthday party, I wasn't just reacting to Elizabeth's hurtful words. I was taking positive action. My phone showed several missed calls from Elizabeth when I turned it back on. Instead of returning them immediately, I called Michael, who was flying back to Australia the next day. "Mom," he answered, sounding relieved. "I've been worried about you. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Michael. Better than fine, actually. I've been making some decisions." "What kind of decisions?" he asked cautiously. "The kind that a capable, independent 70-year-old woman is perfectly entitled to make," I replied. "About my life and my future." There was a pause before he responded. "That sounds ominous." "It's not meant to be. I'm simply taking control of my situation. Now, would you have time to meet me for dinner tonight? I'd like to talk to you before you leave." "Of course," he said quickly. "Should I invite Elizabeth?" "No," I said firmly. "I'll speak with her separately. This evening is for you and me." We arranged to meet at a small Italian restaurant that had been a family favorite when the children were growing up. As I got ready, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and excitement. Sadness for the fracture in my relationship with Elizabeth, but excitement about the new path I was forging. Michael was already at the restaurant when I arrived, looking slightly anxious. He stood to greet me with a hug. "You look different, Mom," he said as we sat down. "More, I don't know. Determined?" "That's a good word for it," I agreed. "I've had a productive day." Over appetizers, I told him about my meetings with James and Rebecca, outlining in general terms the changes I was considering. "So you're rewriting your will?" he asked, looking troubled. "I'm reviewing all my options," I clarified. "My current will was written when your father died, and it simply doesn't reflect my current situation." "And this is because of what Elizabeth said?" I set down my fork and looked at him directly. "It's because of what Elizabeth revealed about how she sees me, about how she's been making plans for my life without consulting me. And yes, Michael, it's about the fact that she seems to view me primarily as a future inheritance, rather than as a person with agency and value." Michael had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I still think you might be reading too much into it. Liz has always been, well, practical." "Is that what we're calling it now?" I asked with a raised eyebrow. "Let me ask you something, Michael. Did you know she had already put down a deposit on that retirement home before ever discussing it with me?" He hesitated. "I knew she was serious about it, but no, I didn't know about the deposit." "And did you know she's been discussing my financial situation with my doctor? Asking about my competency?" His shock seemed genuine. "What? No, I had no idea." "Well, she has. Dr. Myers called me this morning, concerned about the conversation Elizabeth had with her last week. Apparently, my daughter has been laying groundwork to question my ability to make my own decisions." Michael looked genuinely disturbed. "Mom, I swear I didn't know about any of that." "I believe you," I said gently. "And I'm not telling you this to turn you against your sister. I'm telling you so you understand why I need to take these steps to protect myself and my autonomy." He nodded slowly. "I understand. But what exactly are you planning to do?" "First, I'm going to live my life on my terms," I said. "I'm looking at options for a new place to live, not a retirement home, but perhaps a nice condo in a building with good security and some amenities. I'm also considering some travel I've always wanted to do." "That sounds reasonable," he said cautiously. "As for my estate," I continued, "I'm exploring options that will ensure my money is used in ways that reflect my values. That may include changes to how and when my assets are distributed to you and Elizabeth." "Mom, I don't care about the money." I held up a hand to stop him. "This isn't about punishing either of you. It's about making thoughtful decisions about the legacy I want to leave. I've worked too hard and lived too long to have those decisions taken away from me." The main course arrived, giving us both a moment to collect our thoughts. As we ate, I deliberately shifted the conversation to Michael's life in Australia, his work, and his long-term girlfriend, whom I'd yet to meet in person. By dessert, the atmosphere had lightened considerably. I wish I could stay longer, Michael said as we finished our coffee. Help you sort through all this. You have your own life to live, I told him. And besides, this is something I need to do for myself. As we said goodbye outside the restaurant, he hugged me tightly. I love you, Mom, and I respect you, not just as my mother but as a person. I hope you know that. I do, I assured him. And I love you too. Now go back to Australia and live your wonderful life. Just don't forget to call your old mother occasionally. He promised he would, and we parted with another hug. As I watched his taxi drive away, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Michael would be fine. Our relationship was solid. Now it was time to deal with Elizabeth. I decided to give myself one more day before that confrontation. I needed to be completely clear and calm when we spoke, not emotional or reactive. So the next morning, I began implementing the first part of my plan, finding a new place to live. I'd spent the night researching options online, and I had appointments to view 3 different properties. The first was a luxury apartment in a building with a doorman and amenities like a pool and fitness center. The second was a small but elegant townhouse in a gated community. And the third was the wild card, a charming cottage on the outskirts of town, with a small garden and a separate guest house. By the end of the day, I was both exhausted and exhilarated. Each property had its appeal, but the cottage had captured my heart. It was farther from the city center than I'd initially considered, but the peaceful setting and the potential for creating a true sanctuary were undeniable. Plus, the guest house could be perfect for when Michael visited from Australia, or for a live-in caregiver if I ever truly needed one. That evening, I finally called Elizabeth back. Mom, finally, she answered, her voice tense. Where have you been? I've been calling for 2 days. I've been busy, I replied calmly, making decisions about my future. What does that mean? She demanded. It means I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss several things. Are you available for lunch? There was a pause, and I could almost hear her calculating whether to be difficult or accommodating. I suppose I could move some things around. Where do you want to meet? The Gardenia Cafe at noon, I said. It was a public place, but quiet enough for a private conversation. Fine, she agreed. And Mom, I hope you've had time to think about our proposal. We really do have your best interests at heart. I'm sure you believe that, I said neutrally. We'll talk tomorrow. As I hung up, I felt a flutter of nervousness, but it was overshadowed by certainty. Tomorrow would be difficult, but necessary. And afterward, I would begin the next chapter of my life, a chapter where being 70 wasn't a limitation, but a foundation for something new and exciting. A chapter where I would show my daughter, and perhaps myself, just how much value I still had. The Gardenia Cafe was busy when I arrived, but I had reserved a table in the back corner that offered some privacy. I was 10 minutes early, giving me time to collect my thoughts and review the notes I'd made. This wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation, but it was necessary. Elizabeth arrived precisely at noon, looking polished and professional in a tailored suit, clearly coming from her office. She was the picture of corporate success, the high-powered marketing executive who always had everything under control. Today, however, that control was going to be challenged. Mom, she greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek before sitting down. You're looking well. Thank you, I replied. I ordered you an iced tea. I remember it's your favorite here. A flicker of surprise crossed her face at this small consideration, given our current tension. Thank you. That was thoughtful. We made small talk until the server had taken our lunch orders and left us alone. Then Elizabeth leaned forward, adopting what I recognized as her negotiation posture, something I'd seen many times when she was handling difficult business situations. Mom, about the retirement community, she began. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I should have discussed it with you first, privately, rather than bringing it up at the party. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But the issue isn't just how you presented it. It's that you made this decision without any input from me at all. We were trying to help, she insisted. Sunset Meadows is one of the best retirement communities in the state. They have independent living options, but also assisted living when you need it eventually. There's a waiting list, which is why we put down the deposit to secure your place. Without consulting me, I repeated. And after you had already spoken to my doctor about my competency. Her eyes widened slightly. Dr. Myers called you. Yes, she did. She was concerned about your questions and your implications that I might not be capable of managing my own affairs. That was crossing a line, Elizabeth. A defensive look crossed her face. I was gathering information, being thorough. You were laying groundwork to challenge my independence, I corrected her. Let's be honest with each other. The server returned with our salads, giving Elizabeth a moment to compose herself. When we were alone again, she adopted a softer approach. Mom, I'm worried about you. Living alone at your age isn't ideal. What if something happens? What if you fall? What if— I could be hit by a bus tomorrow, I interrupted. So could you. We can't live our lives based on what ifs. I'm healthy, active, and perfectly capable of making my own decisions about where and how I live. Elizabeth stabbed at her salad. You're being stubborn. I'm being independent, I countered. There's a difference. Fine, she sighed. What do you want then? To stay in that tiny apartment forever? To refuse any help until you have a crisis and we have to make emergency decisions? What I want, I said carefully, is to be treated with respect, to be consulted about decisions that affect my life, and to be valued for who I am, not just for what I might leave behind when I'm gone. Her fork clattered against her plate. Is that what you think? That this is about your money? Isn't it? I asked quietly. At least partly. You became very interested in my living arrangements shortly after I mentioned my meeting with James Peterson. A flush crept up her neck. That's unfair. Is it? Then explain to me why, after 5 years of me living independently without issue, you suddenly decided, without any discussion with me, that I needed to move to a retirement community, and why you felt the need to question my doctor about my competency, and why you thought it appropriate to announce all this at my birthday party in front of everyone as if I had no say in the matter. Elizabeth was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight. I was concerned. That's what children do when their parents get older. They get concerned. Concern is one thing. Taking over is another. I wasn't taking over, she protested. I was planning ahead. Planning ahead would have involved me in the conversation from the beginning, I pointed out. But that's not what happened, is it? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she took a different tack. Michael agrees with me, you know, about the retirement community being a good idea. I've spoken with Michael, I said calmly. He agrees that the decision should be mine to make. This clearly wasn't the response she was expecting. Elizabeth had always been able to bring her brother around to her way of thinking in family matters. It was a dynamic that had existed since they were children. She led, he followed. Well, regardless, she said, regrouping, we need to discuss your future living arrangements. That apartment isn't suitable. I agree, I said, surprising her again. You do? Yes, which is why I've already found a new place to live. Elizabeth's expression was a mixture of shock and suspicion. What new place? I've made an offer on a cottage about 20 minutes from here. It has a lovely garden and a separate guest house. The offer was accepted yesterday. You bought a house? She exclaimed, loud enough that several nearby diners turned to look. She lowered her voice. Without talking to me? Without having anyone look at it? Mom, that's exactly the kind of impulsive decision that worries me. It wasn't impulsive at all, I corrected her. I've been considering my options for some time. I viewed several properties. I had an inspector examine this one thoroughly. I consulted with my financial advisor about whether I could afford it. And yes, I made the decision independently, as is my right. Elizabeth looked stunned. But a cottage? With a garden? Who's going to maintain that? You can't possibly. I can and I will, I interrupted. I'm hiring a service for the heavier garden work, but I look forward to planting and tending my own flowers. The cottage itself is single level and has already been updated with features that will make it suitable for aging in place if necessary. I can't believe you did this, Elizabeth said, shaking her head. It's irresponsible. Actually, it's quite responsible, I countered. I'm planning for my future on my terms. Speaking of which, I've made some other decisions as well. Something in my tone made her look up sharply. What decisions? I've revised my will and created a new estate plan. The color drained from Elizabeth's face. You've changed your will? Already? Without discussing it with the family? My will is not a family decision, I said firmly. It's my decision, just as it was your father's and my decision when we wrote our original will. What changes? She demanded. What have you done? I took a sip of water, maintaining my composure. The specifics aren't important right now. What matters is that I've created a plan that reflects my values and wishes. This is because of what I said at the party, isn't it? Elizabeth's voice had taken on an accusatory tone. You're punishing me for trying to help you. This isn't about punishment, I said, looking her directly in the eye. It's about reality. You made it very clear at my birthday party that you see me as having no value anymore, except, presumably, for whatever financial support I might provide. That was hurtful, but it was also informative. It helped me realize that I needed to take control of my life and my legacy. I didn't mean it that way, she protested, but there was a lack of conviction in her voice. I think you did, I said gently. Perhaps not so bluntly in your own mind, but that was the message. And it's made me reconsider many things. So you're cutting me out of your will, she concluded bitterly, because of one comment made in the heat of the moment. I didn't say that, I replied. I said I've revised my estate plan to better reflect my values. That's all I'm going to share for now. Elizabeth pushed her barely touched salad away. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting to a simple suggestion about a retirement community. No, I'm responding to a pattern of behavior that culminated in that simple suggestion, I corrected her. A pattern that includes making decisions for me without my input, questioning my doctor about my competency, and stating publicly that I have no value at 70. You're twisting my words, she insisted. I'm quoting them, I countered, and I think we both know what you meant. We sat in tense silence for a moment. The server returned to check on us, sensed the atmosphere, and quickly retreated. So, what now? Elizabeth finally asked. You moved to this cottage and… what? Cut us out of your life? Of course not, I said, softening my tone. You're my daughter, and I love you. I want you in my life, but on different terms than what you've been proposing. What terms? She asked suspiciously. Respect, I said simply. Recognition that I am still a capable adult who gets to make her own decisions. Appreciation for who I am now, not just for what I might leave behind. And no more attempts to control my life or my choices. Elizabeth stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps she was. For years, I had been the accommodating mother, the supportive grandmother, the widow who had stepped back to let the younger generation take the lead. But that wasn't the whole of who I was, and it was time she recognized that. You've changed, she said finally. No, I corrected her. I've remembered who I am. There's a difference. We finished our lunch in a strained atmosphere. Elizabeth was clearly processing everything I'd said, recalibrating her understanding of our relationship. As we prepared to leave, she made one more attempt. Mom, I really do care about you. Everything I've done has been out of concern for your well-being. I believe you think that, I said, gathering my purse. But sometimes concern can cross the line into control. That's what happened here. And the will? She asked, unable to let it go. Are you really going to keep that a secret? For now, yes, I said firmly. My estate plan is private until I choose to share it, just as yours is, I'm sure. This isn't over, she warned as we walked out of the cafe. We need to talk more about all of this. We will, I assured her. But not today. I have an appointment with my real estate agent to finalize the details on my new home. As I watched her walk to her car, shoulders stiff with frustration, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. This confrontation had been necessary, but difficult. Our relationship was changed now, perhaps permanently, yet I also felt lighter, more authentic. For too long, I had allowed Elizabeth's perception of me to limit how I saw myself. That ended today. In the taxi on the way to the real estate office, I checked my phone and found a text from Michael, who had safely arrived back in Australia. Thinking of you today. Hope the talk with Liz went okay. Love you, Mom. I smiled and texted back. It was challenging but necessary. Moving forward with my plans. Love you too. And I was moving forward, in more ways than one. The cottage was just the beginning. I had other plans taking shape, plans that would show Elizabeth, and perhaps the world, exactly how much value a 70-year-old woman could have. The next phase of my life was about to begin, and for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited about what lay ahead. The cottage was everything I had hoped for and more. Nestled on a quiet lane with mature trees providing privacy, it had the charm of an English country home, but with modern amenities. The previous owners had thoughtfully renovated with aging in place in mind. No steps at the entrances, wider doorways, a walk-in shower with grab bars discreetly installed. But none of these practical features detracted from the cottage's appeal. Moving day came 6 weeks after my confrontation with Elizabeth. In that time, we had spoken only a few times, and those conversations had been brief and formal. She was still processing her anger at my decisions, and I was giving her the space to do so. Michael called regularly from Australia, supportive, but wisely staying out of the middle of the conflict. I had hired professional movers, but Eleanor insisted on being there to help me oversee the process and set up my new home. As we directed the placement of furniture and unpacked essential items, I felt a growing sense of excitement and peace. "This place suits you," Eleanor observed as we took a break on the patio, looking out at the garden that was now mine to tend. "I can see why you fell in love with it. It feels right," I agreed. Like the next chapter I didn't know I was waiting to begin. "And how are things with Elizabeth?" she asked carefully. I sighed. "Strained. She's still upset about the changes I've made, especially about the will, even though she doesn't know the details." "Are you going to tell her eventually?" "Yes, when the time is right," I said. "But not yet. She needs to understand first that our relationship can't be about my estate or her controlling my life. It has to be about genuine connection and respect." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "And the other plans? Are you still going forward with those?" "Absolutely," I confirmed. "In fact, I have a meeting next week with the consultant Rebecca recommended." The other plans Eleanor referred to were the most exciting part of my new beginning. After careful consideration and many discussions with my financial advisor and attorney, I had decided to use a portion of my assets to establish a foundation. The Margaret and Richard Palmer Foundation would focus on supporting older adults in maintaining their independence and dignity, as well as funding initiatives that bridged generational gaps. It was a way to create a legacy that reflected my values while also making a tangible difference in an area I cared deeply about. And not incidentally, it was a way to demonstrate that a 70-year-old woman could still contribute meaningfully to society. The first week in my new home passed in a blur of activity: arranging furniture, planting the first flowers in my garden, meeting neighbors, and setting up my new routine. I felt energized in a way I hadn't in years, tackling each task with enthusiasm and purpose. On Saturday morning, I was in the garden, hands deep in soil as I planted lavender along the stone path, when a car pulled into my driveway. I looked up to see Elizabeth stepping out, looking tentative, a rare expression for my always confident daughter. "Mom," she called, approaching the garden. "Your new place it's lovely." "Thank you," I said, standing and brushing soil from my gardening gloves. "Would you like a tour?" She nodded, and I led her through the cottage, showing her each room with its thoughtful touches. She was quiet, observing everything with a critical eye that I recognized from her childhood, the same look she'd had when assessing whether a situation met her standards. "It's bigger than I expected," she commented as we completed the tour in the kitchen. "And very well set up." "Yes, the previous owners did an excellent job with the renovations," I agreed, putting on the kettle for tea. "Would you like to see the guest house as well?" "There's a guest house?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, it's small but perfect for visitors. I thought Michael might stay there when he visits from Australia. Or my friends, if they want to come for a weekend." Elizabeth absorbed this information with a slight frown. "It seems like you've thought of everything." "I've tried to," I said, preparing our tea. "That's what responsible planning looks like. Considering options, making informed decisions, preparing for various possibilities, while still living in the present," I added, unable to resist the small dig. We took our tea to the patio, sitting in comfortable chairs overlooking the garden. For a few minutes, we sipped in silence, the tension between us palpable but not overwhelming. "I'm still upset about the will," Elizabeth said finally, setting down her cup. "I think I have a right to know what you've decided." "Eventually, you will," I assured her. "But the will isn't what you should be focusing on right now." "What should I be focusing on then?" she asked, a hint of her usual sharpness returning. "Our relationship," I said simply. "The fact that you're here is a good start. I've missed you." The honesty in my voice seemed to catch her off guard. Her expression softened slightly. "I've missed you too. The kids keep asking when they can see you." "They're welcome any time," I said. I'd love for them to visit. This garden could use some young energy. They'd like that, she acknowledged. Then, after another pause, Mom, I'm sorry about what I said at your birthday, about you not having value anymore. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, though I noted it wasn't completely unqualified. How did you mean it? I asked gently. She struggled visibly with her answer. I meant that your role has changed, that you should be enjoying retirement, not worrying about maintaining an apartment or dealing with day-to-day hassles, that we should be taking care of you now. I appreciate the sentiment, I said carefully, but there's a difference between offering support and taking over, between valuing someone's contributions and dismissing them because of their age. Elizabeth looked away, gazing at the garden. I didn't see it that way. I know, that's part of the problem. She turned back to me, her expression more vulnerable than I'd seen in years. I don't want to lose you, Mom. Not over this. You won't lose me, I assured her. But our relationship needs to change, to be based on mutual respect, not on you making decisions for me or seeing me primarily as what? She prompted when I hesitated. As a future inheritance, I finished quietly. She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. Elizabeth, you started pushing the retirement home idea immediately after I mentioned meeting with James about my investments. The timing wasn't coincidental. Her cheeks flushed. It wasn't just about the money, but it was partly about the money, I pressed. Be honest, at least with yourself. She didn't answer directly, which was answer enough. After a moment, she changed the subject. So what are your plans now, besides gardening in this lovely new place? I decided to let her redirection stand. Actually, I have several projects in the works. One of them is establishing a foundation. A foundation? She repeated, surprised. Like a charity? Yes, focused on supporting older adults' independence and intergenerational programs, I explained, watching her expression carefully. Richard and I always talked about giving back in a more structured way. Now seems like the right time. Elizabeth was silent for a long moment, processing this information. I could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes, what this might mean for her inheritance, how it would affect the family finances. That's a big undertaking, she said finally. Do you have people helping you set it up properly? Yes, I've hired excellent advisors, I assured her. It's being done correctly and responsibly. More silence. Then, is this what the changes to your will are about? Leaving money to this foundation instead of to your family? And there it was, the crux of her concern, laid bare. My estate plan reflects my values and priorities, I said, deliberately not answering directly. Just as yours does, I'm sure. The foundation is part of the legacy I want to leave, but it's not the only consideration. Mom, please, Elizabeth said, frustration evident in her voice. Can't you just tell me what you've decided? This uncertainty it's difficult. I studied my daughter, seeing both the accomplished professional woman she'd become and the little girl who had always needed to know exactly where she stood, the planner, the controller, the one who hated surprises and loose ends. I understand this is uncomfortable for you, I acknowledged, but I need you to understand something important. My relationship with I understand this is uncomfortable for you, I acknowledged, but I need you to understand something important. My relationship with you cannot be contingent on what I leave you in my will. That's not healthy for either of us. Elizabeth opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, seeming to recognize the truth in my words. The details of my estate plan will become clear in time, I continued. But for now, I'd rather focus on rebuilding our relationship based on who we are to each other now, not on future inheritances or your concerns about my competency. She sighed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair, a rare gesture of discomposure for my always polished daughter. Okay, she said finally. I'll try. But this foundation thing, it's a lot to process. I know, I said gently. Change often is, but I think it's going to be something wonderful, something meaningful that honors your father's memory and creates a lasting impact. We talked a while longer, carefully navigating around the more sensitive topics, focusing instead on her children, her work, and my plans for the garden. When she finally rose to leave, our goodbye was warmer than it had been in weeks. The kids would love to come help with the garden next weekend, she said. If that works for you, that would be wonderful, I replied sincerely. I'll make cookies for them. Mom, she hesitated at her car door. I am sorry about everything. I worry about you. I know you do, I said. But I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm excited about this new chapter. As I watched her drive away, I felt cautiously optimistic. This wasn't complete reconciliation, but it was a start. Elizabeth was trying, in her way, to adjust to the new dynamic between us. It wouldn't be easy. She had spent too many years seeing herself as the decision-maker, the practical one who knew best, but at least she was making an effort. The following week was filled with meetings about the foundation. The consultant Rebecca had recommended, a retired nonprofit executive named David, was proving invaluable in helping me navigate the complexities of establishing a philanthropic organization. You've got a clear vision, he complimented me as we reviewed the draft mission statement. That's more than half the battle. I've had time to think about what matters to me, I explained. And what I've observed is missing in how our society supports older adults. Well, your experiences give you a perspective that many foundation creators lack, David noted. You understand the issues from the inside, not just as an abstract cause. We were meeting in my cottage's sunny breakfast nook, papers spread across the table, when my doorbell rang. Excusing myself, I was surprised to find my son-in-law, Robert, standing on my porch. Robert? I greeted him, genuinely puzzled. In all our years of family connection, he had never once come to see me alone. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, he assured me. I was in the area for a meeting and thought I'd stop by to see your new place. Elizabeth has been talking about how nice it is. I invited him in, introduced him to David, who was just gathering his papers to leave, and then showed Robert around the cottage. He was polite and complimentary, but I could sense an underlying purpose to his visit. Coffee? I offered once the tour was complete. That would be great, he agreed. In the kitchen, as I prepared our drinks, he finally got to the point. Margaret, I hope you don't mind me speaking frankly, he began. I've always appreciated your directness, Robert, I replied, placing his coffee in front of him. Elizabeth is worried, he said, about this foundation you're starting, about the changes to your will. She feels like you're making major financial decisions without proper consideration. I sat down across from him, measuring my response. Robert was a financial advisor himself, which added a layer to this conversation. He had always been the one to handle the family's finances, including, I suspected, plans for any inheritance they might receive. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I assure you, I've consulted with excellent financial and legal advisors. My decisions are well considered and align with my values. Of course, he backtracked slightly. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But major philanthropic commitments can have significant tax implications, and they can complicate estate planning. I'd be happy to look over your plans, offer a second opinion. I smiled, seeing through the offer. Thank you, Robert, but I'm quite satisfied with my current advisors. James Peterson has managed my finances for decades, and Rebecca Winters comes highly recommended as an estate attorney. He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. Rebecca Winters? I don't think I know her. She specializes in complex estate planning, I explained, particularly involving charitable foundations. I see, he said, and I could almost see him making mental notes to research her later. Well, the offer stands if you ever want another perspective. Family helping family, you know. I appreciate that, I said, deciding to be direct, but I think it's important to maintain some professional boundaries here. My financial decisions are my own, just as yours and Elizabeth's are yours. He looked surprised at my frankness. Of course, I didn't mean to overstep. I know, I assured him. And I understand that Elizabeth has sent you to gather information. That's natural. She's always been one to want all the facts. Robert had the grace to look slightly embarrassed at having his mission so transparently named. She's concerned, he admitted. This foundation, it's unexpected. Many of the best things in life are, I replied with a smile. Change isn't always easy, but it can be good. Necessary, even. We chatted a while longer about safer topics, his work, the children's activities, local news. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. This is a lovely place, Margaret. Very you. Thank you, Robert. That's exactly what I was hoping for. After he left, I sat in my garden, reflecting on the visit. Robert's appearance confirmed what I had suspected. Elizabeth was still struggling with the changes I was making, still trying to gather information and possibly influence my decisions. It wasn't surprising, but it was a reminder that rebuilding our relationship would take time and consistency on both our parts. The next weekend brought the promised visit from my grandchildren, accompanied by Elizabeth. 10-year-old Emily and 8-year-old Jason arrived with boundless energy, eager to explore the cottage and especially the garden. "Grandma, can we plant some vegetables?" Emily asked, already eyeing a sunny corner of the garden. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I agreed. "I've been wanting to start a vegetable patch. What should we grow?" While the children and I planned our vegetable garden, Elizabeth sat on the patio, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. When the kids were thoroughly engaged in digging and planting, she came to help me prepare a tray of lemonade and cookies. "They're having a great time," she observed, arranging cookies on a plate. "So am I," I said sincerely. "It's good to have young energy around." "Mom," Elizabeth began, her voice uncertain, "I've been thinking about our last conversation, about the foundation and everything." "Yes?" I prompted when she hesitated. "I want you to know that I support you," she said, looking directly at me. "Whatever you decide to do with your money, with your life, it's your decision. I may not always agree, but I respect your right to choose." It was a significant concession from my strong-willed daughter, and I recognized the effort it took for her to say it. "Thank you, Elizabeth," I said, squeezing her hand. "That means a lot to me." "I just want you to be happy," she added. "And safe." "I am," I assured her. "Happier than I've been in a long time, actually. This place, the foundation, the plans I'm making, they all feel right, like I'm finally fully living again, not just existing." She nodded slowly. "I can see that. You seem different, more energetic, more like how you were before Dad died." "Grief changes us," I said softly, "but so does finding new purpose." We brought the refreshments out to the garden, where the children proudly showed off the neat rows of seeds and seedlings they had planted. As we sat together enjoying cookies and lemonade, I felt a deep contentment. This was what I had hoped for. Not erasing the difficult conversations or pretending they hadn't been necessary, but moving forward to build something new and better. The following months brought steady progress on multiple fronts. The foundation moved from concept to reality, with a board of directors consisting of myself, David, Eleanor, and 2 other individuals with expertise in aging issues and nonprofit management. We received our official 501c3 status and began the work of defining our grant-making priorities and processes. My relationship with Elizabeth continued to improve, though there were still occasional tensions. She had stopped asking directly about my will and estate plans, but I sometimes caught her watching me with that calculating look, especially when the foundation was mentioned. Still, she made consistent efforts to visit, to include me in family activities, and to respect my independence. Michael came for a 2-week visit, staying in the guest house and helping me with various projects around the property. His presence was a balm, his uncomplicated acceptance of my choices a welcome contrast to Elizabeth's lingering concerns. "You know," he commented one evening as we sat on the patio watching fireflies in the garden, "I've never seen you this happy. Not since before Dad got sick, anyway. I feel like myself again," I told him. "Like I've remembered who I am beyond being a wife, a mother, a grandmother." "I'm glad," he said simply. "You deserve this." It was 6 months after my 70th birthday party when I finally decided it was time to share the details of my estate plan with my children. I invited both Elizabeth and Michael, who was visiting again, to dinner at my cottage, asking them to come without spouses or children. I wanted this conversation to be just the 3 of us. I prepared all their favorite foods, Richard's famous pot roast, homemade rolls, and apple pie for dessert. The meal was pleasant, filled with conversation about family news, Michael's work in Australia, and Elizabeth's recent promotion. It wasn't until we moved to the living room with coffee that I broached the subject they had surely been wondering about. "I've asked you both here tonight because I want to share the details of my estate plan with you," I began. "I know this has been a source of curiosity, especially for you, Elizabeth." She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but didn't deny it. "As you know, I've established the Margaret and Richard Palmer Foundation," I continued. What you don't know is how this affects what you might eventually inherit. Both of them were watching me intently now, Michael with calm curiosity, Elizabeth with barely concealed tension. I've divided my estate into 3 parts, I explained. 1/3 will go to the foundation as an endowment to ensure its work continues. The remaining 2/3 will be divided equally between you two, with provisions for my grandchildren's education. Elizabeth visibly relaxed, though she was clearly calculating what this meant in dollar terms. However, I continued, there's an important condition attached to your inheritances. What kind of condition? Elizabeth asked, wariness returning to her voice. In order to receive your full inheritance, each of you must serve on the board of the foundation for at least 3 years following my death, I said. If you choose not to serve, your portion of the inheritance will be reduced by half, with the difference going to the foundation. There was a moment of stunned silence. You're making our inheritance conditional on working for your foundation? Elizabeth asked incredulously. I'm making a portion of your inheritance conditional on participating in a legacy that matters deeply to me, I corrected her. It's not about the work, Elizabeth. It's about understanding the values behind the foundation, about being involved in something that will outlast all of us. I think it's a great idea, Michael said, surprising both of us. It's a way to keep the family connected to Dad's memory and to the causes you both cared about. Elizabeth was still processing, her expression a mixture of relief that she wasn't being disinherited and annoyance at the condition. What would being on the board involve exactly? She asked finally. Quarterly meetings, reviewing grant applications, helping to set priorities for the foundation's work, I explained. Not a huge time commitment, but enough to be meaningfully involved. She nodded slowly. And if we both serve our 3 years, we each get 1/3 of the remaining 2/3? So essentially, each of us would receive 2/9 of your total estate? Leave it to Elizabeth to immediately calculate the fractions. Yes, that's correct. Unless you choose not to serve, in which case your portion would be 1/9, with the other 9th going to the foundation. I see, she said, and I could tell she was running the numbers in her head, trying to determine what this meant in actual dollars. The monetary value isn't the point, I said gently. The point is being involved in something meaningful, something that will help others and honor your father's memory, something that reflects values we all share, or at least values I hope we share. Michael spoke up. I'm in, Mom. I think it's a brilliant way to structure things. It's not just about money passing from one generation to the next. It's about passing on values, purpose, connection. I smiled at him gratefully. Thank you, Michael. That's exactly what I was hoping for. We both looked at Elizabeth, who was still quiet, thinking. I need some time to process this, she said finally. It's not what I expected. That's fair, I acknowledged. It's a lot to take in. But I hope you'll consider the spirit behind the condition, not just the financial implications. As they prepared to leave that evening, Michael hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Mom. For all of it. The foundation, the cottage, standing up for yourself. Dad would be proud too. Elizabeth's goodbye was more reserved, but not cold. I'll call you tomorrow, she promised, after I've had time to think. After they left, I sat in my garden as twilight settled, reflecting on the evening. I had no illusions that Elizabeth was fully reconciled to my decisions, but we had come a long way from that disastrous birthday party 6 months ago. She was trying, in her way, to accept the new reality, to see me as a person with agency and value, not just as an aging mother whose decisions needed to be managed. And I was changed too. The woman who had sat silently at her birthday party, shocked and hurt by her daughter's dismissal, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, clearer about her worth and her purpose, someone who had remembered that 70 wasn't an ending, but a foundation for what could come next. The inheritance Elizabeth had been so focused on would come to her eventually. But the most valuable legacy I could leave wasn't money. It was the example of a life lived fully and purposefully, regardless of age. It was the foundation that would help others maintain their dignity and independence as they aged. It was the values that would outlive me, carried forward by my children and grandchildren. That, I thought, as I watched the first stars appear in the evening sky, was an inheritance worth leaving. 1 year after my 70th birthday, the birthday where my daughter had declared I had no value anymore, I stood at a podium in the community center, looking out at a room full of people gathered for the official launch of the Margaret and Richard Palmer Foundation. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of activity. The foundation had received its first major donation beyond my initial funding, a substantial grant from a larger family foundation impressed by our mission and approach. We had hired a small staff, established our grant-making processes, and were already reviewing applications for our first round of funding. In the audience, I could see my family sitting in the front row. Michael had flown in from Australia for the event. Beside him sat Elizabeth, who had surprised me by becoming increasingly involved in the foundation's development. After our dinner revealing the estate plan, she had taken a few days to think, then called to tell me she wanted to join the board immediately, not wait until after my death. "I have expertise that could be useful now," she had explained, "and I'd like to understand how it all works while you're still here to guide it." I had been touched by the gesture, recognizing it as Elizabeth's way of accepting the new reality and trying to be supportive. Her professional skills were indeed valuable to the foundation, and working together on something meaningful had helped heal the rift between us. Now, as I prepared to give my speech, I caught her eye and she gave me an encouraging smile. The smile of a daughter proud of her mother, not concerned about her inheritance. "Good evening, everyone," I began. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate the launch of the Margaret and Richard Palmer Foundation. This organization represents the culmination of a journey that began in an unexpected way, with a birthday party that didn't go quite as planned." There was a light chuckle from those who knew the story. Elizabeth shifted slightly in her seat, but maintained her smile. At that party, I was confronted with a question that many of us face as we age. What value do we have in a society that often equates worth with youth, productivity, and economic contribution? It's a question that can shake us to our core, making us wonder if our lives still have meaning once we pass certain milestones or transitions. I paused, looking out at the diverse audience, young professionals, middle-aged couples, older adults like myself. All had come to support a foundation dedicated to changing how our society views and supports aging. The answer, I discovered, was both simple and profound. Our value doesn't diminish with age. It transforms. Our contributions change, our perspectives deepen, our priorities clarify. And in that transformation lies incredible potential, not just for ourselves, but for our communities and for future generations. I went on to explain the Foundation's mission, to support programs that enable older adults to maintain their independence and dignity, to fund initiatives that bridge generational gaps, creating opportunities for older and younger people to learn from each other, and to change the narrative around aging from one of decline to one of continued growth and contribution. This foundation is not just about giving money, I emphasized. It's about creating connections. It's about challenging assumptions. It's about recognizing that a 70-year-old, or an 80-year-old, or a 90-year-old still has gifts to offer, wisdom to share, and purpose to fulfill. As I spoke, I could see heads nodding throughout the audience. This message resonated not just with those in my age group, but with younger people who recognized that they too would age, that they too would one day face the question of their value in later years. "I am grateful to my family," I continued, "particularly my daughter Elizabeth and my son Michael, who have embraced this vision and joined me in bringing it to life. Their support and involvement have made this not just my legacy, but our family's shared commitment to creating a world where aging is honored rather than diminished." I caught Elizabeth's eye again and was moved to see tears there. This public acknowledgement of her support was meaningful to her, I knew. Despite our difficult moments, she had ultimately chosen to stand with me, to understand my perspective, to value me as I was now, not just as the mother who had raised her or the grandmother of her children, but as a woman with purpose and agency. After the speech, as we mingled with guests at the reception, Elizabeth made her way to my side. "That was a wonderful speech, Mom," she said, giving me a hug. "You were amazing up there." "Thank you," I replied. "It means a lot to have you here, to have your support." She looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said at dinner 6 months ago, about how the inheritance condition wasn't really about the money, but about values. I didn't fully understand then, but I think I do now." "Oh?" I prompted, curious about this reflection. This foundation isn't just about giving grants or supporting causes, she said. It's about challenging how we think about aging, about worth, about contribution. It's about creating a different future, not just for you, but for me, for my children, for all of us. Exactly, I said, touched by her understanding. That's exactly it. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it, she continued. And I'm even more sorry about what I said at your birthday. You were right. I did mean it in a way. I had this idea that at 70, you should be winding down, stepping back, letting us take care of things. I couldn't see that I might still have my own path to walk, I suggested when she hesitated. Yes, she admitted. My view was so limited, so wrong. I squeezed her hand. We've all had to adjust our thinking, me included. That's growth, that's learning, and it's never too late for either of those things. Later that evening, after all the guests had departed and just my family remained, we gathered in the community center's small garden. The spring air was mild, scented with blooming flowers, and a sense of accomplishment and peace surrounded us. To the Margaret and Richard Palmer Foundation, Michael proposed a toast, raising his glass, and to our remarkable mother, who reminded us all that value isn't determined by age, but by purpose, courage, and love. Here, Elizabeth seconded, raising her glass. As we clinked glasses, I looked at my children's faces in the soft evening light. Michael, who had supported me from the beginning, Elizabeth, who had struggled but ultimately found her way to understanding, my grandchildren, who were learning invaluable lessons about aging and value that would shape their perspectives for life. And I thought of Richard, who would have been so proud of this moment, of this foundation that bore our names, of the family gathered here to celebrate its launch. 1 year ago, my daughter had told me I had no value anymore. She had seen only my age, not my potential. She had focused on my inheritance, not my continued capacity for growth and contribution. Today, that same daughter stood beside me as we launched a foundation dedicated to changing exactly those limiting perspectives. She had learned what I had rediscovered, that value doesn't end at 70 or 80 or 90, that purpose and meaning are lifelong pursuits, that we all have gifts to offer at every stage of life. The inheritance she had been so concerned about would come to her eventually, but the true value, the legacy that mattered most, was already being realized in this moment, in this work, in this transformed understanding of what it means to age with dignity, purpose, and joy. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Elizabeth linked her arm through mine as we walked to the parking lot. "You know what I've been thinking, Mom?" she said. "What's that?" "I can't wait to see what you do at 80. I laughed, genuinely delighted by this shift in perspective. "Neither can I," I replied. "Neither can I." And in that moment, surrounded by my family, buoyed by the successful launch of the foundation, I felt the full circle of this journey, from the hurt and anger of that birthday party to the peace and purpose of this evening. From being told I had no value to creating something of lasting value. From feeling diminished by age to being empowered by it. 70 wasn't an ending after all. It was simply another beginning, one with its own gifts, its own lessons, its own unique value. And I was ready for whatever came next.